Good evening, everyone. It's 6:33 p.m. and we're going to call this January 20th, 2022 meeting of the Drainage Board to order. To start off with, as per COVID policy, no one is in council chambers this evening except for the Deputy Clerk, Joel Watts, who's also the Drainage Board recording Secretary, and myself, Councillor Andrew Vail, Chairman of the Drainage Board. The Drainage Board members are present via Zoom, being Councillor Ron Ashmore, Councillor Patrick O'Reilly, public members Jim Oriotis, Mike Verbeck, and Tim Wilcox, and member Charles Clark is absent tonight with cause. So that brings us to 2.1 on our agenda this evening. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Jim, seconded by Councillor O'Reilly. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest this evening? Okay, seeing none, that moves us down to the adoptions of the minutes from the previous Drainage Board meeting of December 12th, 2021. I assume everybody's had a chance to go over those minutes. Is there a motion? Councillor O'Reilly, you're on mute, Councillor O'Reilly.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Ashmore. Any discussion? Seeing none, calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. That brings us down to number 3 on the agenda this evening, a meeting to consider the Mcecron Brown Municipal Drain. 3.1, presentation of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, esteemed councillors and members of the board. Thank you for your time today, and to the general public. We're pleased to be here to provide the presentation for the Mcecron Brown Drain as the engineer. I will share my screen and confirm everyone can see what I see. Logo screen, I hope. A little perhaps thumbs up from the folks if you can see what I'm looking at. Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly, I can see you. Okay, thank you for your time. We're here today to discuss our engineer's report for the Mcecron Brown Municipal Drain. And to begin, let me introduce you to the members of the team. My name is Ken Smith. I'm a professional engineer with DM Wills Associates. I manage the Water Resource Engineering Group, and I have been a project engineer as well on this job. I have with me Mark Hoare, a senior project engineer with our firm. We have co-authored this report. We're both here today to provide a presentation and to answer questions as they arise. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Mike Farquhar, Supervisor of Technical Services with City of Kawartha Lakes, and Richard Monaghan, who is, I've written Drainage Superintendent. I understand that's either an acting role or in development, but thank you, Richard, for being here as well. The purpose of today's presentation is to first and foremost provide some context for the engineer's report, some background on the water feature and the drain. We'll walk through the process for a new petition for a drain, section 4, in detail, and we'll highlight the elements of the process that have been relevant to this project. And then we will walk through the actual proposed work for the drain to give a sense of scale and purpose. Without further ado, let's describe where we are here. So this map shows the location of the site. I've got Lindsay noted near the center of that, your screen. So we're about 35 kilometers northwest of Lindsay at the intersection of County Road 46 and Palestine Road. To get an aerial perspective, this is the intersection of County Road 46 and Palestine Road in 2019. That date is important and material to the conversation on the drain, as you will see through the presentation. But to highlight, I'm just going to make sure, can folks see my cursor as well? Councillor O'Reilly, I'm hoping you can give me a thumbs up if you can see a cursor moving. Okay, great, thank you. Forgive me for pointing you out, but you're on my screen. Okay, so the water feature that we're looking at here drains down across the lands owned by the Mcecrons and crossing County Road 46 onto the property that is owned by DSNB Farms. And this channel is historical. At this point, this channel has been filled in and replaced with a piped conduit from the origination of the channel here to its outlet at Palestine Road here. The channel continues along Palestine Road as an open channel and continues south towards Whites Creek, and we'll see a better, fuller view throughout the presentation. To begin, a little bit of history on the drain. We understand that this drain is a historical award drain, established in 1904 as the Eli Budd Award Drain. There are some documents available describing the feature, including a award of engineer report and also a plan of the drain. I would note that the plan of the drain is a top-down view of the water feature, and it does not include any information on the constructed cross sections or slopes or depths of the original drain. So we know where it is, but not exactly the nature of its construction. In 2009, just make sure that's out of the way, a City of Kawartha Lakes drainage superintendent was called to the site to discuss concerns for poor performance of drainage in the area. During that conversation with the Mcecron property and DSNB Farms, a number of issues were reported, including the infilling of the channel on DSNB Farms, and DSNB Farms reported poor drainage of their lands as a result of ongoing infilling and sedimentation of the downstream channel. As I mentioned, a key consideration in this process was the nature of the existing information and the lack of sufficient data to inform what ought to perhaps be reinstated to recreate the Eli Budd Award drain, and that is no cross sections or slopes or depths. So following the conversations, and I understand OMAFRA was involved with this conversation, the two parties that were involved in that conversation, the Mcecrons and DSNB Farms, filed a petition for a new municipal drain, which was received by the City of Kawartha Lakes on September 3rd, 2019. This is an interesting old document from 1904 showing the alignment of the original drain. And I will highlight that this area here is the consistent with what we saw in the aerial photograph along County Road 46 and Palestine Road. So the Drainage Act process. This next slide is very busy and too small to read. I acknowledge that. And so what I wanted to do was to give an overview of the full process that's followed once a petition is received under Section 4. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this into 4 quadrants, kind of zoom in on each corner, talk about the relevant aspects of the process to this undertaking. But just to understand the way that the flow works, generally you start here at the top left, and if all goes well, you move downwards straight through the core tasks. And then upon reaching the bottom of the left, you'd move back up to the top right, and then you'd move down through, again, the core tasks, ideally, on the right side. We are, for context, here, just past the halfway point in this process, holistically. So what I'll do is I'll look at the first quadrant, the top left first, give a very brief overview, and then I'll highlight the task we understand path to date. So under this section of petitions received by council, council has an opportunity to distribute that petition to various agencies for their input early in the process, including environmental agencies, to determine whether any additional preliminary information should be collected prior to awarding an engineer to continue with the petition. In this case, what has happened is the petition was filed, as I mentioned, September 3rd by DSNB Farms and Robert and Linda Mcecron. The process followed fairly smoothly. This is actually before our involvement as engineers, but ultimately council received the feedback from any agencies that were circulated early in the process, And the next step would have been that DM Wills and Associates, ourselves, were appointed as the engineer in accordance with Section 8 of the Act. That happened during a council meeting, regular council meeting, October 24th, 2019. I'll make a quick disclaimer that I note the process will refer to council. I understand in City of Kawartha Lakes that we have the privilege of working with a drainage board followed by a engagement with council. So I say council to collectively describe that process. Moving forward, part 2 of the process, this is now the bottom left side of the whole screen we saw, involves potentially a lot more work by the engineer, which are the orange boxes. So we at this point had been appointed by council, and the first thing we would have done would have held the on-site meeting, which I'll describe in a minute. Again, in a straightforward process, the process moves straight down through the core of this flowchart. And some of the other aspects of the flowchart, including a preliminary report, like an options evaluation for various potential solutions for a drain, or a contingency plan if a petition is not valid, would characterize these side columns of the flowchart, and neither of those occurred. So we can go straight down the middle and describe what happened. So the first thing that we did as the engineer for this project was to conduct an on-site meeting. The on-site meeting is completed in keeping with Section 9 of the Drainage Act. And it's important to clarify that under Section 9, the intended attendees at that on-site meeting is not everyone within the entire watershed or all of the lands that would potentially drain to and through the watercourse. Rather, it's important and required to invite all of those who are named in the petition. So the Mcecrons were involved and DSNB Farms. We found it prudent to include immediately adjacent properties because the petition could be adjusted at that meeting and additional petitioners added or subtracted to the petition. And so page 4 of our report lists the attendees at the meeting. We actually held 2 on-site meetings to accommodate individuals that couldn't attend the first, and due to at that time the very new and challenging COVID protocols in July 2020. The first step after the on-site meeting was for us as the engineer to determine the validity of the petition. So the Drainage Act provides very clear direction on whether a petition is or is not valid. Depending on an area that requires drainage, which is determined by the engineer, we would look for various criteria, including a sufficient acreage of land or hectareage of land that would be represented by the petitioners, or a majority of petitioners within the area requiring drainage, or a municipal body or road authority. If any of those 3 scenarios had signed on to the petition, then it would be valid. So we determined that more than 60%, as is the requirement, of the land area was represented by the petitioners, and thus we provide recommendation to council in a letter that the petition was a valid petition. Moving forward, I would note that at that point, we took an opportunity to engage a local conservation authority, Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, to discuss the nature of the work and particularly the interest around the now closed portion of the drain on DSNB Farms. At that time, it was determined that the Conservation Authority would require that the drain be reopened in that location. They were not adverse, however, to an open drain constructed in a new location, subject to a floodplain assessment report. So they requested that we complete a floodplain assessment report to determine there would be no impacts from a flood conveyance point of view to adjacent lands. Wills completed that report after gaining approval from DSNB Farms that that report and the subsequent work to relocate the drain would all be assessed, those costs, to DSNB Farms. The report was submitted to the Conservation Authority and received. Moving down then through the process, we have then completed a finalized report, December 2020, and provided that to council. I note here that we again recognize council being the drainage board and subsequently council. And the council then has made a decision to proceed with the project to this meeting to consider. That does not mean the project is yet a go, but the decision was made to distribute the report to the watershed and conduct this presentation. Part 3, which I've now moved up and to the right side of the full process, is where we are today. So the clerk in this top box has sent out a notice of the meeting and the final report to the watershed. That has happened just in the beginning of January, in keeping with the schedules prescribed in the Act. And this is appropriately the first time that some residents and landowners that would be named within our report within the schedule would be notified of the project. So the previous on-site meeting was for the petitioners in the surrounding area. Now this notice is for anyone who is captured within the entire watershed draining to and through the drain. A few things that have happened between now and then. We have done our absolute best in the last 3 weeks to field some questions and some calls. We understand there are a number of concerns, and that's very appropriate. It's part of the process. I'd just like to highlight a few of the conversations that I was able to have by phone with residents within the watershed in the last 2 weeks. Mr. Lokoff and I discussed the location of the drain within Mr. Lokoff's property. Just specifically that we did not intend to relocate the drain to a new location on those lands. Those are the lands immediately downstream and south of Palestine Road. I had a quick conversation with Mr. Mcecron on 2 occasions. Firstly, just to provide adequately sized drawings, and secondly, discuss the nature of the disposed fill material within Mr. Mcecron's property, and we had ongoing conversations about that. Mr. McIntosh and I spoke regarding the nature of a secondary access shown on our plans, and that's been subsequently removed. I'll talk about the versioning of our reports, noting that we have a slightly different version of the report on the online version today than was mailed out, with 2 small changes, and I'll describe those in a moment, and this is one of them. We've removed the secondary access. And then we had a conversation with the Thorns regarding a number of questions. We received some input, some regarding the nature of the direction of drainage. And we had a discussion, and I am sure there are ongoing questions still. I would just like to note that in no way am I asserting that we would have satisfied each of these residents. It does not mean we had an exhaustive conversation of all their concerns, but these were a few of the things that we had an opportunity to discuss. So now we're here at the meeting to consider, where we are providing a presentation of the report. Today, it's our understanding that the board and then through council would provide a opportunity for petitioners in understanding the report to withdraw their name from the petition, and we would be able in a position to respond about whether the petition would still be valid. And then ultimately, there will be a decision made in keeping with the resolutions in the agenda about whether there will be a rejection or a referral back to us on the report, or whether it would be accepted to move forward in the process. Next steps in the process, I won't walk through these in much detail just because we're not sure what exactly the outcome of today will be, but I do want to assure the community that there remains opportunities for review and appeal of any of the technical elements of the report through 2 avenues. One is a court of revision, wherein a local body would be engaged to talk about changes to the report, and then an appeal process either before or after the court of revision to a tribunal. And the tribunal would be a member of in a formal hearing to allow for a decision to be made regarding the nature and outcome of the petition and the engineer's report. The only other thing I want to highlight, because I think it's going to be important to the conversation today, is this location where there is a provision in the process for construction costs that are out of line with the estimates. And we understand, particularly through COVID, the uncertainties in various costs. And so I just want to reassure everyone that if there is a tendered construction cost comes back and it's outside of a range of 33% of the engineering estimate that's provided in our report, then there is provisions in the process for a return to a meeting to consider. And again, another opportunity for petitioners to change their position on the process. What I would like to do next, that takes us through the process, and thank you everyone for your patience. I know there's a lot there. What I'd like to do is just take a moment to review the actual nature of the work. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to switch to a our report, just because I have a better, clearer version I can use. So I'm going to take us very quickly through the drawing set, highlighting just a few details that I think that the community would want to know about the drain. The first is this first figure demonstrates the watershed. So we've focused in here towards the nature of the drain construction, which is shown on the Mcecron property and extends down across Willow Green Meadows and the McIntosh properties to White's Creek. But there's a larger watershed which drains to and through the creek. And these individuals shown within this gray hatched line would be named in part on our schedule of assessment and would bear the costs due to their contribution of flow to the feature. I'm sure we'll get some questions on this and we welcome them. In terms of the nature of the drain, just want to highlight on our next slide, thank you for your patience here, we have allocated various access routes and structures along the way. We also have delineated the existing floodplain provided by the Conservation Authority and confirmed in our floodplain impact assessment. We also have included these red to orange areas noting where waste material from the drain would be allocated and placed. It's a thin layer, we're talking a 6-inch layer, but it's important that the material be placed on same property for in keeping with management of excess material regulations within the province. I won't go through the full plan and profiles. I'll just note it's a very flat segment of drain. To achieve a positive slope throughout the drain, we have generally slopes in the order of 0.3%, and in some cases flatter, which is, by all intents and purposes, a very flat constructed feature. And I think what I want to give perspective on is this. We have a variety of cross sections, intended cross sections that we've developed. And this area here is downstream of Palestine Road. And what I want to do is just make sure that the community here is clear on the nature of the work. We intend to improve and deepen an existing channel by an order of, in this case, about a foot to about half a meter. So 1 to 2 feet deepening, no significant widening. Really, this is a clean out of the existing feature for most of its length. Now, that's not the case on DSNB farms, as you can see in sections like this one, where the channel is now in a new location adjacent to County Road 46, and we're digging out a all new channel. Our report is clear that the additional excavation that we estimate to create a new channel, along with that floodplain assessment report, has been assessed to DSNB farms as a special assessment. So the community is not paying for the excess material that's required to recreate this full channel in this location. As we continue upstream towards the Mcecron property, once again, we return back to really a formalization and a clean out of an existing feature for most of its length. Going to return now to my presentation. And that's the intent of these slides, which I've now covered. And so I want to conclude then with a quick description of our schedule of assessment. I've removed property owners from this. This is a bit of a sanitized version, but through the drainage process, of course, the construction works and the associated fees and the engineering fees and any other special assessments are distributed, costs are distributed throughout the watershed on the basis of outlet liability, those individuals and properties who are contributing drainage to the feature, benefit allocated to those who would receive some sort of improvement due to the work, an opportunity to drain or other improved value to their land, a special assessment, which is other variety of other things. And you'll note one location where we have allocated additional costs due to special circumstances. And then allowances, which are fees owed to particular property owners to recompense them for nuisances and inconveniences or takings from their land for the actual property or maintenance accesses or temporary disruptions due to the fill piles. My last quick point here is, I noted before we have a versioning consideration for our report. We've sent out a version 3 of our report the first week of January. Our version 4 is online with a few minor changes to the legal property owners. We become aware of a few changes in ownership. And furthermore, the removal of one secondary construction access, temporary access on Mr. McIntosh's property, which is determined to be really an infeasible route. That takes me through to the conclusion of my presentation today. Thank you all very much for your attention. And at this point, I would welcome questions as per the agenda.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Smith. So at this point, we are at a question answer period. Does the board at this point have any questions of the engineer? If not, then I'm going to move to the, oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor O'Reilly.
No, I was just going to say maybe it'd be best that we hear the other questions and then maybe we can come in with the engineer at the end. Just a suggestion.
That's the direction I was going, Councillor O'Reilly. Thank you. So at this point, we'll go to the members of the public that are online that have questions and answers. So with this item on the agenda, there are quite a number of residents online. So I think what I'll do is I'll go down through the list that we have confirmed that are online, and I'll call out your name. And if you'd like to turn on your video and turn off your mute at that time and ask your question, or if you don't have a question, just you can say that you don't have a question at this time, and we'll try and move through this. So first on my list, I have Robert and Linda Mcecron. Any questions, comments, or anything, Robert and Linda?
Your turn now.
No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Douglas and Constance Drury. Any
We have no questions at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Carson and Maggie Thorne.
Oh, sorry. We have a lot of questions.
Go right ahead.
Okay. You received our petition?
Yes,
Yes,
the board
thank you.
the board
I
has
did.
received
You're
it,
asking
and
me?
Right. There's a lot of people who are not happy with this. We understand why Mr. Brown did what he did. But that affects a lot of people. A lot of people who are not involved in all of this. This is between two farmers
With an issue.
with an issue. We feel that we should go back to the original plans of the Bud Drain and everybody maintain and clean out their own properties. Then we would have no issue.
The engineer here, what is the price of a high hole per hour?
Do you know the question? Like
Did you hear what I said?
Yeah, thank you. Just a moment of process there. Mr. Chair, am I authorized to respond directly to questions? Should I be waiting for you to direct the question to me?
no, go ahead. You're authorized to answer directly to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have the number on the top of my head per hour. If we look into the cost in our engineer's report, we include a variety of different items that would include the cost per hour of various equipments, including earth excavation. And let me just look into the correct appendix for our cost estimate. One moment. Appreciate your patience. While I look for that, perhaps you can enlighten me with a
Okay, so
follow-up.
So the way I come with it is the last time, which was last fall, I was talking to a guy that had a 20-ton hoe. He was charging $160 an hour.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what time of how many hours do you estimate that I will call him the doctor because I can't his name. How many hours do you estimate to clean out his ditch?
Well, we've done it
Would
by
you-
cubic meter. The earth excavation is by cubic meter in our cost estimate. So I don't have a working day estimate developed at this point to relate it to time.
Okay. So I'm a person myself. I would estimate it as being at least 8 hours to do the job.
Okay.
So we're only talking $1,300, $1,400 as a cost factor, roughly.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the owner himself, he can't figure this out. He's a part of the issue.
He's not a farmer.
He's not a farmer. He doesn't understand the situation. We don't need a municipal drainage. What we need is a few of these people to work with the system. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper to do it that way than to go on with this municipal drainage that you guys are trying to shove down our throats. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I certainly hear you. Yeah, there isn't a question in that for me, but I understand your sentiment.
We're just saying that we should clean out the existing ward drain. And we don't need a municipal drain if people were responsible for what their responsible landowners is what it is. Everybody is responsible. These people come up from the city, they buy this land and they don't know anything. They're not farmers. We are farmers. We farm.
Okay, we've got one more question.
Sure.
Okay, it was brought to our attention today that the Simcoe Watershed is just waiting for this vote right now for tonight, basically, okay?
Okay.
All right, now I was under that, if the drainage that Mr. Brown put underground that he had buried, if he doesn't put it back the way it was before, Simcoe Watershed automatically can say that he's altered the drainage. Therefore, Simcoe Watershed steps in with their authority and they take over. Is this correct?
That is in keeping with what we have in our report. So we do mention in our report that it's our understanding that an order has been issued against DSMB Farms and that the Conservation Authority is working with this process to understand whether through this process there'll be resolution. If there isn't resolution, then I can't speak to what the Conservation Authority will decide to do. That's the knowledge we have to date.
Well,
So he can put it back to the way it was?
Are you asking me whether he's allowed to,
no.
or whether
So-
it physically works?
Okay, so what I was told was if he does not put it back the way it was, automatically Simcoe Watershed takes over and automatically Simcoe Watershed puts into a municipal drainage. Is that correct?
No, Simcoe Watershed wouldn't cause it to be a municipal drain. Simcoe Watershed would have a Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority would have the authorization to cause him to reinstate a disrupted water course. And so my understanding of what's happened is the Conservation Authority has acknowledged the infill, has requested a reinstatement of an open channel. When we met with them, they were amicable to a movement on his property, like it's open channel, but it's along the property line, not right through the diagonal to the field. If that is completed, to our understanding, and a permit will be required by the Conservation Authority to facilitate, then they will be satisfied that the open channel has been reinstated. If this process does not continue, the Conservation Authority would continue to be interested in an open channel, but they wouldn't make it into a municipal drain. It would have nothing to do with the Drainage Act.
So don't you think that that would be a better route to go than a municipal drain? If he was allowed to just drain, to put a ditch along the side of his field, and it would save a lot of people a lot of money and a lot of anguish.
I think what's
We do not feed into this. We don't understand why we're involved in this.
You're just whining. So if you take Mr. Brown pays for his shot, And if you take the doctor, what he's gonna maybe, even if he has to pay $3,000, that's dirt cheap compared to what he's paying on for his chunk, all right? And then you turn around and you got Mr. Mcecron doing the same thing, because he's paying about 70,000. Say even 2 hours, two days worth of work. So we're talking even $5,000 to $6,000. It's far cheaper to do it this way, to think about doing a municipal drainage. The same as up farther on up the line, you got Mr. Mitchell, Kevin Mitchell. He's had issues ever since he was bought that property, and yet he has done nothing about it, fixing the problem. A lot of it has to do is neglect on the people that own the property, and on the doctor's part, it boils down to be lack of information for him because he does not understand this situation. It's a hell of a lot cheaper for us to dig our own chunks of ditch out, which we're supposed to do, instead of going into a municipal drainage.
So
For-
I
for
think
my
if,
benefit and
I think if
clarity-
I can just summarize maybe, Ken, I think what Carson and Maggie are looking for an answer for is if the petitioners were to withdraw their name this evening from the petition, can it go back to the way it was in your opinion?
Yes.
So my opinion on the matter is that an award drain is a preferable outcome, and it's the first approach that is generally attempted in cases of drainage disputes. Where an award drain does not work, when there's not an agreement, the municipal drain process is legally available to landowners to achieve drainage. The
But it's not.
challenge, as I stated before, I believe, it's just hear me out here, is there isn't a clear record of what to reinstate. So because there's no plans or profiles for the award drain, there's no clear metric or approved construction for the landowners to clean out. And so there's merit in securing the drainage through the process of the Municipal Drainage Act so that the upstream petitioners are sure and can be assured that the drainage will continue and adequate drainage. I would note that Mcecron is a petitioner for area requiring drainage, but so is DSNB Farms, noting the downstream sedimentation. So reinstatement of the channel on DSNB Farms would solve Mcecron's property, but we also learned of DSNB's concerns with the downstream land. Ultimately, we received the petition as it's presented, and any agreement drains is a matter between the local landowners.
Yes.
Hold on, if Mr. Brown was to put the drainage on what he wants around the outer perimeter, there will be no problem with Mr. Mcecron, because the reason why that happened was Mr. Brown put in a tile, buried it in the ground. And if you want to go up there and look at it, that tile was inadequate for the size of that ditch. And what it does is causes a backup. And this is why Mr. Mcecron is mad. He never said anything in regards to all the previous years before about this issue until his water backed up on his property, caused by Mr. Brown putting a restricted drainage tile in the ground.
Yeah, the process did, I believe, begin with Mr. Mcecron. And as through the discussions evolve over municipal drains, you then look to the downstream receivers and inquire about their adequate drainage. And so, rightly so, DSNB Farms has an opportunity to sign on to a petition to continue the work to ensure their lands are also drained. So I agree that reinstatement of that channel would likely solve Mr. Mcecron's property issues, but DSNB, they're petitioners as well. I can't change that.
We understand that whole part of it. But like I said, again, it boils down to the doctor. If he's willing to do a small amount of money factor in order to clean out that ditch, and even maybe the next one, which is McIntosh, if they were to do a little bit, which there again is minute amount of cost factor compared to this whole municipal drainage, is just crazy.
This is just
So
a
I
cash
think-
cow for the city.
So I think if I can just summarize, I think what Ken is saying in response to Carson and Maggie is if the petitioners were to remove their name this evening, if they felt that all the landowners on the drain were willing to move into a mutual agreement as far as maintenance and stuff like that, that would be an option. Is that what I'm hearing, Mr. Smith?
It is, of course, an option. An agreement drain is always an option if it can be agreed upon.
Okay, thanks. Do you have any further questions, Maggie and Carson?
No, we're done. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so next I have Chrissy and Kevin Mitchell. Any questions? Go ahead.
Hello. My question was, why weren't all the legal landowners included in the Schedule A and B and also received notification?
Just to make sure I understand your question. So our Schedule A and B includes roll numbers and properties for all of the properties that would be draining through the watercourse. And I think your question is why are not all the individuals owners of each of those properties? So if there's two owners for one of those properties, why do they not both get notification? Is that your question?
Yes.
I think that's a very good question. A difficult one for me to answer. We do rely on the municipality to provide and distribute the notices and provide the information for the legal property owners. Don't know if anyone at the municipality or the clerk has any insight on that, but it is our intention to provide notice to any individuals listed as owners of each of those properties. I know that doesn't really answer your question.
Sorry, Joel will answer that for you, Chrissy.
Hi there. So we do send out the notice in the clerk's office, and when we go through the assessment that is provided in the engineer's report, we ask our Revenue and Taxation Division to provide us with the most accurate and up-to-date mailing address with our Taxation Division. And then we go through and create those labels based off of that information. What we often, however, find is that sometimes the names that are on the tax account aren't always exactly matching the legal situation on a property. So there may be names missing, but generally speaking, each property would have received one notice that was in the assessed drain area. And those were sent out in accordance with the Drainage Act, and I think Ken identified those dates in his presentation.
Thank you, Joel.
Anything further, Chrissy?
Also, it appears to me that the proposed municipal drain does not begin at hub 0 of the awarded drain. Is that because it seems adequate, or that we're just to maintain it ourselves?
Are you referring to the downstream limit of the existing drain?
So no. So on the Mitchell property,
Sure, yeah.
the map that we have of the awarded drain
Right.
says that it starts at hub 0, which is in the very east-south corner of our field, and continues to the location where you show it starts exactly at Mcecron.
That's right. Yeah. So we did keep the drain on the Mcecron's land in keeping with our understanding of the petition and the request for the drainage. We didn't identify the Mitchell's land as requiring drainage. And so we didn't bring the drain onto that land, partially to avoid an assessment of benefit to that property. So if we had crossed the property line and gone a little farther, then the Mitchell property would have also been triggered with an assessment for improved lands, and we didn't understand that was consistent with the requirements of drainage. So we're, keen to discuss that if that's an inconsistency with the expectations there. But our understanding is that that was the best way to be in keeping with the request for drainage that we had received. Is that clear? We didn't want to cost you more money, essentially.
But we are getting a benefit anyway, so we are getting an extra charge of benefit for the drainage.
Your overland flow has an opportunity to drain into that system, yes, but you wouldn't have a tile drained access because it would be across property lines. Yeah.
So if the municipal drain went through, we're able to maintain that however we see. It's no longer an awarded drain, or we have to follow specifications set by some awarded drain designation.
That's an excellent question. Do you have to maintain the extra little piece of drain on the basis of the 1904? Given that it is the absolute headwater of the entire system, I wouldn't see any value of it. But I know that there is a process by which award drains get incorporated into municipal drains, and I don't know what happens to small little leftover pieces, if any. That's not something I've encountered. I think you'd be subject to drainage common law, of course. So you wouldn't be able to alter your lands and collect drainage and send it in a different direction. But it wouldn't serve any upstream lands. My engineering response is I don't see value in it. I don't think there's any impact to whatever happens with that extra little tail of the drain. But a legal outcome for the status of the old award drain is a question I don't immediately have an answer for.
Okay, thank you. We're finished.
Thanks, Chrissy. Maybe is that something you could look into, Ken, and get back to them at a later date?
Certainly, be happy to. We'll make note of that. That's an interesting scenario. We thank you for the question.
Thank you. Karen and John McIntosh. All right, I'm not hearing anything from Karen and John. Christine Halbert?
Say yes, Andrew.
Go ahead,
Hi.
Christine.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can. We can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So, did you all read the 6-page petition against this municipal drain from 87% of the landowners?
I can acknowledge its receipt, and the engineer is acknowledging that he's received it and read it, and it's been forwarded. Each member of the drainage board has received it, as has the clerk's office and council.
Okay, I'm going to recap very briefly. There's 87% of the people that are involved in this that don't want it. Almost 50% were not legally served at any time. So from the start, from those 2 meetings in July 2020, those people were not given notice. That's almost 50%.
So they weren't able to attend the original side road meeting.
That's right. So technically, because we've got almost 50% that were not legally served or notified, this whole thing should go from the start, because those people were not included. They're paying for it.
And just a point of clarity, I mentioned this in my presentation, but I want to make sure it's clear for everyone involved. The on-site meeting that occurs early in the process is not intended to be for the watershed at large. It's intended to be for the petitioners and any it's prudent to invite surrounding properties that may become petitioners. But it's not incorrect to not have an invitation sent to those who would eventually end up being named on the schedule. So this is the point at which all those parties named in the schedule ought to be noticed, but the on-site meeting, that's not the intent of that meeting.
Well, just to clarify with that as well, too, pardon me, and I'm a landowner here with Christine Halbo, is that if you don't have those same people at that board meeting, where I do believe in your report, you said there were no objections, but actually there were objections verbally stated that day, but your report does not say that. So therefore, if you don't have more people there that object, they don't have the opportunity to object verbally at those roadside meetings. They didn't have that opportunity. So with that said, you have objection right from the start. Therefore, it should not have gone further. It should have been really a request through Brown and S&D Farms, I think it is, S&B Farms, sorry, to rescind their original request. Plain and simple. Take it back to its original state that
Reinstate.
the S&B farm recklessly filled in originally. No question. There's no comparison, as Carson Thorne stated, the amount of volume, millions of liters of water that would have went through that original Eli Budd drain from Highway 46 across diagonally southwest to the Palestine Quarter Road. There's no comparison. No comparison at all. The volume of water that it could take away compared to that very small diameter pipe and then fill it all in. There's no way that should have happened. So whoever it would be that would be the governing body that should have done cease and desist when he started filling in, that's where the problem started. He should have never had all that time to fill that ditch in. With that said, I know I'm not speaking for everybody, but I'm going to request that Brown and S&B Farm, they pull back their request, rescind it, withdraw, whatever the proper terminology is. I can guarantee you everybody that's signed that petition, that's exactly what we want to happen, just as Maggie said.
So just one quick point that I think is important for clarity. Again, we appreciate the concerns and the preference towards an agreement drain, and I am sympathetic to that. The on-site meeting is not looking for objections from the entire watershed.
And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, that's not the purpose of that meeting. And I want to just make sure that's clear, because as the engineer, we're really explaining the process and the due process. And
I understand that, and I'm not trying to interrupt, but you're referring to, it's not, but in your report, you said there was no objection, and that's not true. There were objections that day. So that information's false.
Okay, yeah, we did receive questions from those that had attended the meeting, but the objections are regarding
objections.
The petitioners.
They were objections.
They were
We did not
Right.
want
With
that
the
drain,
question,
and
it
we
was
specifically said it.
Because you're talking to people that were there.
Okay.
So I'm going to recap the purpose of this petition. This is the last page of the petition against the drain, the municipal drain. Just to refresh your memories on the 6 pages. In the report, costs and expenses for the Mcecron Brown drain in the construction assessment Schedule A is disproportionate to all of the other named property owners as it pertains to benefit, which includes owners that do not directly or indirectly have any benefit from this drainage project between Brown and Mcecron. Number 2, the 100 acres, which is the south half of lot 17 concession 4, is owned by Zuffelt and Clark. It does not drain south into across the road and into the Budd drain at all. It stops at the road. Actually, their land floods until it dries up. Carson Thorne, Fraser Curry properties divert the water in the east half of lot 17 concession 3, owned by Ryan Clark. So it doesn't, and that's where the water basically is held there, because it's a wetland. Number 4, both Schedules A and Appendix A and Appendix A and B, or B on Appendix B, include a landowner named Cheryl Doreen Ross, who no longer lives there and presently omits the current landowner. And there's a few others as well. Like I said, it was almost 50% that were not served. Number 5, 22 landowners are listed in the project, the DM Wells project, when in fact, there are a total of 43 legal landowners. 21 were not served notice or due process about any meetings at all from start to finish, hearings or project expenses, but are expected as taxpayers for the costs and outcomes of the Mcecron Brown drain. This goes against our Charter of Rights. The total legal landowners that were legally served, just under 50% of the total. The environmental impacts, sensitive documented wetlands on the east half of lot 17 concession 3 identified species at risk, which are bobolink and meadowlark birds identified by Lake Simcoe Conservation Authorities, has not been addressed by this DM Wills project report. Number 7, since 2016, lot 18 and 19 concession 4 are under conservation contract, 33 acres, 28,000 trees with Trees Ontario, Cooperative Conservation, in accordance with Environment Canada for climate change to help slow down the water runoff. That was a big project, a $35,000 project to help water slow down. Another 60 acres of lot 18, 19 concession 4 have been under conservation contract with Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority since 2020 for identified endangered species at risk, which are the bobolink and meadowlark birds. This wasn't mentioned in the report. The proposed Mcecron Brown drain will cause irreversible, massive negative environmental impact for the local ecology, species at risk, bobolink, meadowlark birds, and the local environment. Number 8, the proposed Mcecron Brown drain could have a significant negative impact on local aquifers that feed existing wells and watersheds for surrounding properties. Those concerns were in the July 2020 meetings and were not in the report. The proposed Mcecron Brown drain is an expense that the petitioners do not want or to own due to the fact that it will put undue financial hardship on the surrounding landowners and their families now and onto future generations for benefits that they will not receive, especially during a pandemic, to which many people have been negatively affected and suffered since March 2020. Number 10, I'm almost to the end because I have 3 more points. All Canadians have been in a pandemic emergency situation since March 2020. As a result of the lockdowns, we are seeing shortages of labor, services, and goods. In some cases, goods have doubled and tripled in costs. You just mentioned that there would be maybe a 33% increase estimated. Who's to say it will? Who's to say it's not going to be more than that? It's an estimate. So the drainage solution should be simple and affordable without any environmental degradation, negative impact on species at risk, which was not in the report, or causing duress of financial hardship burden on the adjacent property owners, especially in a pandemic when costs cannot be estimated properly. Number 11, page 4, section 4.1.2, third paragraph addresses the issues of access flooding on the Mcecron Brown properties. The simple solution would be to reopen the Eli Budd Drain 1904 that Mr. Brown filled in, and this would, quote from page 4 of the DM Wills project number report. This is a quote from the report. See flooding conditions return to what they were prior to the construction of the 0.4 meter diameter pipe on the DS&B Farms Inc. property. End of quote from that page.
May I'm going to interject just on that one.
I've got 2 sentences. I've got 2 sentences
that
more.
one I need to address.
And then I'll let you go. Former owner of DS&B Farms Inc. property, Lorraine McCrae, has made a signed statement attached hereto stating over the years of owning the property, there was never an issue with the flooding or backup of water, which means if you reinstate that Budd drain, it's going to be back to normal where nobody was complaining. Number 12, the total legal landowners who oppose the Mcecron Brown drain and signed this petition is 87% of the total legal landowners affected by this project. Okay, you can go ahead.
There's only one thing I'm going to just make sure for clarity, and I'm going to ask for some direction from the Mr. Chair, please. But the quote that you've pulled out of our report is actually a quote of our own of the desire from Mr. Mcecron. So what you just quoted was what we had written as record of what Mr. Mcecron was hoping to see, not something that we had stated would happen if it were
87% of landowners are hoping that as well. So wouldn't so that would include Mr. Mcecron.
Well, the quote wasn't us. You've just used that out of context. It's a quote of our quote.
No, I quoted it exactly from your report. That's why I stated the paragraph and the page and the section.
Yeah, of course. That's fine. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm looking for perhaps a little bit of direction on how best to respond. We've heard and received this petition, and there are a number of points made. I haven't received a direct question to respond to here. So can I look for a little bit of guidance as to how you would like us to respond in this case?
Sure. Do you have a direct question that you'd like to ask Christine, or
yes.
Okay, go ahead.
The direct question is, what is it going to take for this to be dropped? Because it's very simple, and it's been mentioned in the report, and it's what 87% of, and it's been mentioned many times. Right. Why not return to the Eli Budd drain?
Okay.
Simple.
So the question, what would it take for this to be dropped? There's a few possibilities. The first is a change in the intention of the petitioners. So the driving force behind this project is the petition, and thus the petitioners. So if either of the petitioners decided to remove their name from the petition, then there'd be a reevaluation as to whether the petition is still valid or not. There is also an opportunity through either the Court of Revisions or a tribunal process on the merits of a legal issue or an engineering issue, a technical issue, for the tribunal to provide an order or a direction for some other type of solution. And I can't tell you what that would be. I'm not the tribunal, but those are really the two outcomes that would alter the course of this project. Either the petitioners change their mind about what's going to be the request, or the tribunal or the Court of the Revision provide some direction to either the engineer or back to the municipality.
The costs are excessive, and hardship on 87% of the other landowners, and many of them, almost 50%, were not served any legal notice or notification whatsoever from the start. Why not the ditch be reopened at Brown's expense when he was the one that filled it in? And that's the simplest, it's the cheapest. Why do we have to move on with this?
Yeah,
why?
The technical engineering answer as to why not just a reopening of the ditch is that DSNB is also a petitioner for lands of their own requiring drainage that we as the engineer have verified. Yeah, there's poor drainage of these lands without a continued instatement and improvement of the lands downstream. That's the reason that the simple, perhaps, answer of reinstatement of the ditch on DSNB farms is not being moved forward from a technical engineering point of view. That's the reason the petition's valid, is because we understand from our review that DSNB has lands requiring drainage as well.
So the other 87% that don't want this, and we've put in our petition against the drain, our petition is not valid, our concerns are not valid.
A petition, and I'm glad you brought this up, a petition under the Drainage Act is a very specific thing. It is a request under a particular portion of the act subject to a specific evaluation criteria. It's not as you may think in a more general sense, a group of signatures asking for something. So we have to differentiate between a petition under Section 4 of the Act and a petition put together by the watershed, either in support of or objecting to a particular outcome. So they are different, yes.
Okay. So we 87% of these people want that bud drain reinstated. That's what we want. Because we are bearing the costs of this. This will put some people out of their homes. This is not right. And especially in a pandemic. We are in uncharted waters, so to speak, and we're in challenging times. And people cannot afford this. They've lost their jobs. They've lost their incomes, some of their businesses. And that's the fact of the matter. And it may not have nothing to do with the drain, but it has everything to do with these people that you're going to be charging, and which they will receive no benefit. Now that's where things are.
Okay, thanks.
So what do you have to say about that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's a question about what I have to say about that, the final statement. Am I to provide a response for that?
So the meeting being held here tonight is for everybody that's affected to ask questions, to gain further knowledge, and put their opinion forward. It will be up to the board at this point whether this goes forward or not, based on whether the petitioners remove their names from the petition or whether they remain at the petition. Your comments are valid, Christine, and they're being taken into account with the board. Do you have any other questions of the engineer based on the report?
No, I don't.
I do.
Oh, hang on, Fraser does.
Thanks.
Hang on.
Go ahead, Fraser.
Not to, I know it's been asked, and so what's the process then of getting this request to rescind the original request, if you will?
So
Is there an application?
Yeah, the appeal. Let me.
No, I'm not talking an appeal. Like it's an appeal, but you said that, so then is it just a verbal or a written request to both Brown and Mcecron to take their names off of the original, their petition, if you will?
So the
So,
request for them to
Fraser,
take
I
their
can answer
names
that.
off happens to. Oh, sure. Please do. Yeah.
Sorry, Ken. So I can answer that, Fraser. So later on in the agenda, after the question and answers, and once the board has a chance to ask question and answers, it's 3.3 on the agenda, where we formally ask the petitioners at that point whether they would like to remain on the petition or to withdraw their names from the petition. And they have to verbally.
Oh, very good. And
They have to verbally acknowledge yes or no at this meeting. It's also an opportunity for any other landowner, anybody else that's in the report or the drain to add their name to the petition if they so wish. And maybe Ken can touch on what the benefits are to some of those individuals by doing so or not.
fair enough. Very good. Thank you.
Are you able to speak to the benefits of somebody adding their name to the, sorry, Ken, to throw you under the bus there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. I figured we were doing that through process. Yes, certainly. Actually, we have an example that's very helpful through the Mitchells. They discussed the upstream end of the channel and the remainder of the award drain. If they were to ask to be added to the petition, noting that some of their lands require drainage, then the project could be extended or recontemplated in a way to include either a branch or an extension of the channel to their lands. What that would do is it would obviously give them an opportunity to drain, but it also would assess them for benefit. So you'll note most properties, including I believe yourself, would have been assessed for outlet liability, which is fees for draining water to and through the watershed. But benefit is a separate additional cost borne by those individuals who would have some new opportunity to drain. So if another landowner said, you know what, our land doesn't drain very well either, we would really like to have this channel run, past our property line or onto our property, then that can be done, but they should be aware that that would likely come with additional costs assessed to them and to their property.
Any further questions, Fraser, or would you like Ken to explain how the Court of Revision and
No,
the
I
appeal
wasn't asking,
process?
I wasn't asking that question at all.
No, I'm just
Wasn't that-
asking whether
that
you'd
wasn't-
would you like Ken to go through the Court of Revision process and the appeal process, Fraser, or
No.
you are okay with that?
Absolutely. No, you've answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I've got Paul Lockoff on the list. Paul, any questions?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, I can't turn on my video. Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. I would just like to note a couple things and ask a couple of questions. I'm pretty sure, although I'm not a farmer, I'm pretty sure I understand the concepts here. I also like to remind people I'm not a petitioner on this drain, and we have spoken out as not being in favor of this drain from the outset. I would like to point out to some people that prior to this whole thing starting, Mr. Brown made a number of other changes which were not covered so far. And we objected to these to the water board at some point a number of years ago. And these include tile draining Mr. Brown's farm, digging a culvert on the side of Palestine Road. And the culvert actually extended further west than these drains as well. So my concern has been really, although my property doesn't flood, is there going to be enhanced water flow onto my property as a result of these changes that Mr. Brown has taken onto himself? I would like to ask the members from the city of Kawartha Lakes if they could comment. It's been 2 years now. I mean, is it okay just to kind of change water flow? And at what point does the city come in and say, you really can't do that anymore? You should, why haven't we solved this problem so far? It appears we're going down this direction of this municipal drain, and yet years ago somebody should have said, you just can't block flow to other people's farm. I would like to say it appears pretty clear that the prime beneficiary of this entire project is Mr. Brown. I mean, he's blocked the flow from Mr. Mcecron's farm essentially, and he's created enhanced flow to my farm. I got to say, I'm pretty shocked at the assessed cost of my farm, which is approximately just under $30,000. And what we're doing is we're digging a drain out, going down an extra foot to perhaps enhance water flow from other properties. I do acknowledge my responsibility to maintain my drain, and I'm willing to do so. The question is a little bit, however, I don't border on Lake Simcoe and I don't border on a creek, so it would be reasonable if that continued drainage would continue past my farm, and it seems that the property owner south of us is willing to do so. I'd like, I guess the question that some of us are kind of wondering at this meeting, though, is there a reasonable alternative that we could be looking at to solve this problem that would be more cost effective? And, if that would be an agreement by all landowners to maintain their drains as they should, and given criteria, what does that involve and what date should that be done by? And would that satisfy the petitioners that maybe they would reconsider their petition, which is going to be very expensive for their neighbors? I'd certainly be willing to do that. And I think I'm a major party for this because Mr. Brown's property drains directly onto mine. But I think that would require drainage of Mr. Mcecron's property that would be adequate, which is clearly not the case right now. So anyway, my questions are, how do we proceed with an alternative approach? And towards the city, why are people allowed just to do whatever they want seemingly, and there don't appear to be any repercussions? Thank you.
Okay, so as far as the process tonight and the drain going back to what it was before, it's not basically, it is the same answer as what it is. At this point, the purpose of this meeting tonight is so everybody has a chance to have their questions answered and their comments and their opinions heard. And then the petitioners have an opportunity to, withdraw their names from the petition or leave it on. They also have the opportunity to speak to their neighbors and work out a mutual agreement that everybody can live with. But that's up to the petitioners and the individual landowners that it affects. As far as the city of Kawartha Lakes and dumping water onto a neighboring property or whatever, under the Drainage Act, that's not allowed to happen, right? And this board exists because of that. But that is up to the landowners to act under the act to file either a petition or a grievance or whatever for that purpose, and then that's this body is how that gets dealt with. Does that answer your question, Mr. Lockoff?
Well, it answers the question, but I guess when I did complain about it, nothing was done. The tile installation continued, and the digging of the ditch along Palestine Road continued, and it's still there now. So I understand the process, but I guess the question is, what do we?
Okay, no, I understand. Mike Farquhar, are you online? Can you kind of jump in and give some clarity?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you. So the City of Kawartha Lakes does have an alteration to grade bylaw. However, at the time, I don't believe that the work was done on the property that the bylaw was in place. Also, there are repercussions as the work was done within a regulated area, and hence the involvement of the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, who has reviewed the situation with the landowner and the work that was done, and pending an outcome or resolution, whether a municipal drain moves through, I would assume the Conservation Authority would then pursue with the landowner the reinstatement of the existing channel. However, a report would still need to be done, and a profile would still need to be created. With the original Eli Budd drain, we have a plan, but we do not have the original profile, so we can't put back the Eli Budd drain back to the original profile because we don't have it. In situations like that, for instance, if the filling in of the channel did not happen, and there was still issue with downstream landowners for cleaning out, the landowner could petition the drainage referee to require landowners to clean it out. In certain cases that have happened with the drainage tribunal or the drainage referee, the drainage referee would order that. However, in the absence of profiles, the drainage referee usually orders then engineer's report to be done. So we would be back to pretty much the point in the process that we are currently, where we have an engineer's report for a municipal drain. Now, in this situation, we have a petition. So we have to follow the process within the Drainage Act we validated the petition, an engineer was appointed, and we have an engineer's report. And hopefully that maybe answered Mr. Lockoff's question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, somewhat it does. I guess many of us are wondering if Kawartha Lakes had taken action on this initially, we Mr. Mcecron probably wouldn't have flooding of his farm, and we wouldn't be in this situation. But again, it almost seems that there should be an alternative approach here to a municipal drain, and that may be give us an engineering criteria what you would like, and we will look after it. You know, but as I said, I think $30,000 to enhance an existing drain across my property seems like a bit of a stretch, and I think we're hearing that from the other landowners as well.
Thanks, and there's no doubt that that is the sentiment, Paul, and the alternative that you're talking about is what we've mentioned earlier is a mutual agreement between the petitioners and the affected landowners, right? If the petitioners remove their name from the petition, that is the alternative, is those individuals coming up with a mutual agreement that everybody can live with. Did you have any further questions? Okay, thank you. That brings us to Matt Balston.
I guess I just had a question for Ken there. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Just wondering how you determine the hectares or acres of watershed each individual property would drain into that, the original bud drain, if you will.
Sure. So the way that we determine the watershed, the boundary of where the limits of the drainage to this drain occur, is a combination of things. We really have 4 sources of data that we're using. The first is a walkabout, especially to determine key pieces of infrastructure. So when we're determining the drainage areas contributing to a lands, we would have to be careful of any artificially, like man-made features, so culverts, drains, ditches. So we make sure the culverts are where we think they are. We use sources from either the Ministry of Natural Resources or the local conservation authority for the locations of watercourses. So in this case, the blue lines you'd see in the catchment area are taken from the Conservation Authority's definitions of regulated watercourses that they have identified and given status. The third and fourth sources of data are topography data. So we understand the elevation of the land, either through Ontario base mapping or 2018 SCOOP data, it's called. It's ortho imagery. It's photographs used to determine elevations of the land. So we draw that line based on our understanding of the hills and crests of the land to determine which way the water flows.
Okay, I think that covers it. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Matt. Dave Brown.
Yes, we've got some comments to make. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you, Dave. Go ahead.
Okay, my colleague here, Jim McComb, has some comments to make on what has been the questions asked so far. Go ahead, Jim.
So we in this situation, we're going to replace the drain. That's why there's a special consideration cost to DSB Farms. So that cost of digging the ditch on their property is quite a part out of their pocket. We'd consider having a different arrangement, but we have to have unfettered drainage and across south of Palestine Road so that the water doesn't back up onto north of Palestine Road where the tile outlets. And so we've offered to Dr. Lockoff to clean this ditch out of DSMB's cost a couple years ago, that's the cheapest option. And we hear you, Christine, and we hear the other members of the public that we'd like to do it at cheapest cost too. And but we need to have a contract or something to ensure that our drainage isn't backed up again. And that's why DSMB has petitioned this, and I in cooperation with others in the watershed. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Ryan Clark.
Hey, good evening. I just have a question, actually a couple questions. So we all agreed that if we went back to the original, that this would all go away, correct?
Correct.
Can you hear me? Okay. So why was there not an engineering or an assessment or an estimate done on the smaller project? Why did we go to a $350,000 plus 33% increase project? I believe that's a little overkill, and I don't think the benefit you're going to gain from that outweighs the smaller initiative. Why would we not keep it simple? Why are we over engineering? Sorry, Ken. A huge municipal drain that is going to increase flow and dump it on Margaret and Carson's property. I'm the property just east of what you're looking to start at Robert's Place. I'm also concerned because we have a new house on there and we're running a surface well. And if you guys alter that and I lose my drinking water, I'm going to have a bigger problem. And who's going to take responsibility for that?
Okay, so
right, there's not a lot of water up there. You can ask Ken or anybody else up there for drilling water. It's either salt or it doesn't exist or it's got gas. So we are very restricted on the type of water we can actually access for our houses and livestock for a few people. If this drainage alters that whatsoever, it's going to cause issues for the families.
Okay, so I'm going to tackle the
But
first part.
I really like, sorry.
Sorry, so I'm going to tackle
ahead.
the first part of your question about the smaller project or whatever, and then I'm going to turn to Ken with your question about the well. Okay, so as far as why the engineer report is what it is, it's because that's what was petitioned under the Drainage Act. Right, so that's what the engineer reports on is based on that petition. The smaller opportunity or whatever, or however you want to look at it, is totally up to the petitioners and the neighboring landowners if they can come to a mutual agreement as to how to handle the drain that everybody can live with. And my understanding at this point that is still an option if, you know, the petitioners feel that a mutual agreement can be reached with everybody. So I'll turn to Ken to answer the well question.
Okay, but before you jump to the well question, sure. But why did we not do an engineering? Why did we not get different options? Why were we only given the large option? If we knew that was a possibility of resetting it back, whether we didn't have the original specs or not, it could be engineered to understand and create a spec and then give us an estimate and say, okay, option A is $350,000. Option B is $35,000. Same benefits. What do you think we should go with?
Ken, can you tackle that?
Well, again, it comes back to the rights of the petitioning. I think the value of the drain, especially the benefit, is about having the long-term protection and assurances that the drain won't be modified and will be maintained long-term. And that's in large part the value. The construction cost itself, like the Cadillac actual construction solution, isn't really that dramatic. We're not putting in a bigger ditch than would have been envisioned through a different project. We're not going significantly deeper And so from the engineering point of view, I don't think that the value is substantially different in terms of a Cadillac over-engineered solution. The process, the petition process, the cost there is due to the non-agreement and the result of a petition. And that is the cost of working through the process and ensuring an adequate outlet for the farmers.
So we are following process and not common sense. You're telling me that you build a $350,000 ditch, even though we all agree that to modify the existing back to as close to normal as possible, which probably max would cost you 35 grand. And I'm really overestimating that. That makes sense. Forget process, forget what the check boxes say. Logically, you can actually justify and say, doing the smaller project, which would do exactly the same thing and put us back to something that has worked for over 100 years, makes sense to go over and do a much larger project that's going to cost landowners more money than I want to pay.
Yeah, and of course, that's not quite my position to comment on. That does,
agreed.
Of course, would be preferable to have an agreement, small projects work out. I'm not commenting on which process is better or not. I'm just trying to explain why there's what the value in the petition process is representing. And it's the solution to a non-agreement, essentially.
Yeah.
In terms of the aquifer question, if I may, because we did receive that in the petition as well, I will just quickly share my screen again. I want to just highlight, I'm going to jump into construction drawings. This is in the report. These are construction drawings.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to highlight the extent of the construction, particularly at the upstream end. This is the north, I mean, we're a little bit tilted, but it's the north side of the Mcecron property. And beneath this, we have a profile view. The dashed line is the existing ground and the straight black line is the proposed bottom of the channel. You see some culverts along the way and such. And what I really want to highlight is, particularly at the upstream end, we're not digging way down to create some new path for water. We don't envision that we're going to be drawing water from a new location to a new location. If anything, we're smoothing out the route to get there. And the slope of this 0.1% is noticeably flat. In my profession, we often create low impact development swales, we call it, where we're trying to promote water infiltration as the water flows. And this would be the kind of criteria for slope we'd be trying to achieve. So no, this doesn't cause us a particularly high level of concern as an engineer for pulling water away from where it ought to be. If we were digging a new channel or a new alignment from start to finish, or we were digging way down, then we're not intending to move a different flow of water. We're just trying to stop it from getting hung up along the way.
That's fine.
I hope that provides some technical clarity.
Yeah, and your one comment where you said, when we put this in place, it's not supposed to be messed with. I think that law has been around for a couple 100 years as well. And guess what? It got messed with. And that's why we're here. So if you think that nobody's going to mess with this when you're done, sorry, have fun.
The only difference I'd note between the 100 years, you're quite right. The award drain puts the responsibility on the landowners to maintain the drain. A municipal drain is maintained by the municipality. Yep. And so that opportunities arise by the municipality to enact a clean out rather than any particular homeowner or landowner.
Yeah, and you guys have to come back on a regular service schedule, which means we will be billed for following cleanups and everything else as well. So this is not a one-time cost to the landowners. This will be a reoccurring cost, not as much, but a reoccurring cost on their taxes moving forward, period.
Assessed as per our second schedule. There's a Schedule B for maintenance. Yeah.
Which will also go up. Yeah. Okay, I'm done. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Clark. Donna Perry, any questions, Donna?
Oopsie, hello. No, we're fine. No questions.
No questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, at this point, is there any further questions? Does this board have any further questions before we move to 4.3?
Hello? Hello?
Yep.
Hello?
Yep. Maggie?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, go
I have
ahead.
several.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So he was talking about cleaning out this drain that we will be reassessed. Like if this goes through, not only do we pay for the drain, then our taxes, we are reassessed because we have land improvement. Is that correct?
When I said reassessed, I didn't say reassessed, but it has nothing to do with taxes. There's a separate schedule that distributes cost for future maintenance, and it's a little different than our schedule to distribute the cost for construction. So you're right that the initial construction would result in a bill to the watershed, and so would future maintenance works. But I didn't talk about a reassessment for tax purposes.
No, that's because that's not your job.
Well, that's
not
City of
expected.
Kawartha Lakes will reassess us because we've had land improvement.
Supposedly.
That I don't know about.
Okay, so we have the two farmers with a problem, correct? Brown and Mcecron.
Yes, that's right.
Because basically it's Brown and Mcecron with these problems. But if we revert back to just putting it back to the way it was, Brown putting in a bigger drain or fixing what the problem was, Robin McCacker's never cleaned out his drain. If Mitchell's cleaned out his drain, the doctor cleans out his drain, and then we could easily come to an agreement that we wouldn't have to go this route. We also want our property reassessed because I do not feel that we and Christine and Fraser we do feed into it, but we are also feeding into where Ryan Clark is, and he has a wetland there, and we are feeding into his water source. So we would like our place to be reassessed. And I talked to you guys, and you did not do a walkabout.
Let me again, I'm just going to, if I could, share my screen. I want to make sure I'm clear on which location you're talking about. I think I am, but I'd like to be absolutely sure. So let me get to my watershed plan. Give the slowness of my computer at the moment. Okay. So when we spoke, we talked about drainage here. We're talking about this parcel here. We talked about drainage to the northwest, and we understand that's the case. And you're talking about draining into a wetland, and you're talking about this location. Is that correct?
Yes, which is Ryan Clark's.
Right. So thank you. Appreciate the question. We've looked back at all of our records and aerial mapping and photography and such, and it's our we can see clearly that the water in this complex does continue on and out and into the drain. Ultimately, we can see the connection of the channel. So if your concern is that this area here does not contribute to the drain, then I received the question, but I think we've confirmed for our own comfort that that's the direction the water would flow, or at very least spill in a more significant flow event. I want to make sure I was clear.
You done?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We got one more question.
Sure.
This isn't a question for you. It's a question for Andrew Vail, and he can relate it. What I'm hearing tonight is Mr. Brown is willing to honor his part, but he wants a contract. Is the through the doctor in order to get this clearance. I'm asking those two owners, are they willing and agreeing that they will do this, write up a contract between the two of them? I know they had a bit of disagreements in the prior, but are they tonight willing to sit down and say, yes, we can work this out, and yes, between the two of them, they will write up a contract in order to solve this problem? Andrew.
No, I hear you. I still hear Carson. So Dave.
Because they both talked about it. They both talked about it here. But the question is, are they, the two of them, willing to work together? This is what we need to know tonight.
To resolve the issue.
To resolve this issue.
Agreed.
Okay, so Dave Brown and Paul, Robert, is there an opportunity tonight to come to a mutual agreement? Or after tonight's meeting, if names are removed from the petition, to form a mutual agreement? Is that an opportunity?
Could I speak? We've said all along, we're willing to maintain our drain. I mean, clearly where our property drains to has to do something similar, because we don't want to act as a reservoir, but we're willing to do our part, and we've said so all along. I think we need some, like, I don't think this is a contract between various neighbors. I think we'd like to see some criteria, what's required to make a proper drain, and what would be adequate. And we'd be willing to do our part.
I would just note, as in keeping with Mike Farquhar's point, that the engineering report that we've developed, the solution that we've developed, would be applicable to that scenario. So the engineers' work to create a drain could form the context for a solution between the parties.
I don't think the parties need the engineering. I don't want to speak for them, but I think it's just something you can take with a simple transit shot from Highway 46, basically, over to the property we're talking about. It's a pretty simple survey shot, which wouldn't require an engineering team. I think it would be just mutually between these landowners to get that clarified.
Hey, Mike.
I'm on. Carson Thorne here.
Yep, sorry, just a minute, Carson. Mike, can you speak and give some clarity that at this point, if some individuals would like to try and put together a mutual agreement, what the options are, what we can do at this point?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the board and to the members of the public. Now, I believe this option had been reviewed at the beginning prior to the filing of the petitions, and it should be noted too, the petitioner should not feel under any duress to make a decision with regards to public comments, whether to remove their petition or carry on with their petition. But if the petitioners decide tonight, when asked by the clerk, if they choose to remove their petition under the Drainage Act, they're responsible for all costs to date of the engineer's report. I would also ask the board, or the petitioners and the board, to know that for any work required to be done in the drain, the existing Eli Budd drain or that channel, there will be required a permit from the Conservation Authority. And the Conservation Authority will most likely require an engineer's report to be able to issue a permit to allow the work to happen in that water channel.
That sounds to me that you're making it cost prohibitive on something that should not have gone this far in the first place. Definitely should not have.
I would also note through you, Mr. Chairman, to the board and to the members of the public, DM Will's cost estimate that's what it is. It's a cost estimate, and it's based on their applicable work to date that they've done in other projects and standards of the industry. However, we won't know what the actual cost is until tendered. Now, what we do, the city tenders it, becomes the steward of that project if approved. The city would tender it through its purchasing policies, seek competitive bidding, and there's other abilities we've done in the past with drains with regards to measures to help keep costs under control. And then we come back to council with what those costs are. And further to what Ken had noted, if the cost of the actual tender comes in 33% over the actual construction estimate, then we have to then bring back that report back to council for consideration.
This could run up to well over $1 million in this pandemic. We have seen costs soar, and inflation is at a historical high. Okay, so there has to be the solution has already been suggested and agreed to between listen, 87% don't want this. We are in different times now. We're not in ordinary times when you're used to estimating a project, going out there and digging, and voila, you have a ditch. You're working with a lot of lives here, and things are different now, and you're not compensating for that difference. You're not adapting, and you're not moving to a more equitable and balanced solution. You are not.
Okay, so at this point, we're at 3.3 on our agenda. This is the opportunity for anybody to add their names to the petition or for the petitioners to withdraw their names. Councillor Riley, go ahead. You're on mute, Councillor O'Reilly.
Sorry, I'm on mute there. Sorry, Mr. Chair. I just like to make a few comments before we get there. First of all, I'm Pat O'Reilly, Councillor. I worked for O'Reilly Drainage for probably 20 years. We installed municipal drains from the Ottawa Valley right through to London. All through, we did a lot of the municipal drains in Mariposa Township, Eldon Township, whenever over the years. And there's never always an easy solution. That's why we're here tonight. We've had some drains put in before where we had mutual agreements, and we've also had drains where we've had the OPP involved, where we've had people show up with a gun when we're on people's property. So while we all want to have a simple solution, we have to go through a process here, and that's why we're here tonight. Because it was deemed that and we hired the engineer, is what we're here to make the discussions on and go forward with it tonight. But the Browns made a valid point. They want long-term guarantee that they're going to have an outlet for their property. And we know over time that McCrae's owned that for a long time, and they weren't wanting to basically, they were happy with the farmland the way it was, but Pat and Lorraine sold it. And so the new cash croppers come in on our own farm. We drained 40 acres, and now it's all drained 100 acres. So that's the way the new cash croppers operate, and they want because the land is, there aren't many farms that aren't worth $1 million today in the area or more. And so I think where the Clarks are coming from, where the Browns are coming from, they want a guaranteed outlet. And I think, and the other thing happens is property owners change farms too. And I think in fairness to the people at the top end of the drain, I think they have a right to certainly have a say, but they also have an ability to see if their assessment on their property is valid, to make sure the water that's going into the drain, if approved, one way or another, either through an agreement or through a municipal drain, that actually that they are assessed properly, if they make sure that they've done an initial assessment. And tonight we're just having a public meeting for those people. This is the first chance for them to comment as well. So I think in order for us to proceed and make sure we'll have a discussion further with the Browns and the Mcecrons to make sure there's a guaranteed that if there's some sort of either a mutual agreement or a municipal drain that works, and for the people that want to drain into it, because on an awarded drain, who's going to maintain, make sure these ditches that people want to tile drain into these valuable farms, that they're maintained, and if these landowners change, who's going to maintain it? Where one of the benefits, even though costly for a municipal, is we know that the municipality will maintain these drains for the future. And so anyways, those are my comments, Mr. Chair, and you can get on with the next part of the agenda.
Comment on that first.
I'd like to comment on those comments. Hello, can you hear me?
I don't believe this is a debate, but
It's not a debate. Every landowner, Councillor O'Reilly, every landowner has an outlet for their water, and it's called the City of Kawartha Lakes ditches. However, on our particular farm, I have more than once asked the City of Kawartha Lakes to come and clean the ditch out so that it could help drain my property. They told me no, won't be happening, not in the budget, quote unquote. So guess what? We don't have an outlet because the city won't look after their own ditches. Maybe in your area, Patty, come on up to Eldon.
I think
I can guarantee you, I'll go right on record. I'll swear an affidavit that I've asked for this ditch here to clean our water out. No, has not happened. Hasn't happened since the city changed over in 2000. So what do you say to that?
Okay.
That's a separate issue than the municipal drain tonight.
Okay, so
It's
at
not a
this
separate
point,
issue. You said no. You said all landowners need to have an outlet. They do. It's to the City of Kawartha Lakes ditches. All land drains to your ditch.
okay, so at this point, okay, okay,
End of
so at this
story.
point, we're at 3.3. Robert Mcecron, can you come on the screen, please?
Okay, you're there.
Robert,
Okay,
at this time, do you wish your name to remain on the petition or withdraw from the petition?
I leave my name on it this time because I have no guarantee I will get drainage away from me. And Mr. Clark pointed out that his property is a reservoir. Well, there's no dam at the west side of it. There's a ditch in it that will pour into our new ditch if I clean to the east end of my property and then Mitchell's take it to the east end of theirs. There's a ditch that's been dug in recent times when Curry's owned that property.
Okay.
You talk to Mr. Brown
Dave,
about getting
Dave,
the water off your property, Robert,
Dave Brown,
and leave the rest of us out.
Dave Brown,
Oh, let me,
Dave,
Yes, I'm,
at this
Yes.
point, do you wish to remain on the petition or withdraw from the petition?
yes, we're gonna leave our name on the petition for the simple reason that 3 years ago, we asked to have Lockoff's ditch cleaned out at our own expense, and we're denied on that. And that's where this here whole thing has come from. And if we don't go with the municipal drain, the same problem is going to happen in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this point in time, is there any other,
So it seems like the problem is the City of Kawartha Lakes, that's the bottom line.
Is
You're
there-
not cleaning out your ditches.
is there any other individual who wishes to add their name to the petition at this time? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Okay, Chrissy and Kevin, did you have your hand up on Zoom?
Sorry, I was hoping for another opportunity to speak. That's why I put my hand up.
Okay, sorry.
There was a comment made about
Sorry,
cleaning
Chrissy.
out awarded drain.
So, okay, at this point in time, we're past that point. So if you've got a question, if you've got a question, we can send that to the engineer or whatever, but we're past the question and answer period. Okay, so at this point, that takes us to 3.4 in the agenda, and that's the recommendation of the Drainage Board to City Council. So at this point, I go to the board. Do you have questions, comments that you would like to make? Do you have a recommendation that you'd like to put forward? Councillor O'Reilly?
Maybe it's a question. Are there two recommendations? We're talking about the recommendation to go forward with the municipal drain as a result of the two, just to be clear that the two people are not prepared to withdraw their names tonight. Is that the recommendation?
So my understanding, Councillor O'Reilly, is there could be 3 possible recommendations from the board tonight with regard to the drain. They're outlined in 3.4.
Which page is that again? I'm just looking at my pages in front of me here.
Page 3.
Okay. If somebody else wants to speak, I just want to go over it.
Okay, is there any other questions? Somebody want to put forward a recommendation?
Well, like the recommendation to request a withdrawal, absolutely.
Sorry, Fraser, this is only for the board at this point, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was on the board, pardon me.
I'll put the recommendation forward. We go forward with the municipal drain for discussion.
Okay, so
That's
Councillor O'Reilly is making the recommendation that the City of Kawartha Lakes Drainage Board recommend that Council adopt the Mcecron Brown Municipal Drain Engineers Report as prepared by Mark Hoare and Ken Smith of DM Wills Associates Limited, and instruct the clerk to prepare the necessary bylaw, that Council proceed with the first and second reading of the bylaw to provisionally adopt the report, and that Council instructs staff to make the necessary arrangements for a court of revision to be held on the Mcecron Brown Municipal Drain Engineers Report as prepared by Mark Hoare and Ken Smith of DM Wills and Associates Limited. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Tim. Any discussion?
Through you, Mr. Chair, let's make some comments. Like, we're talking about an expensive drain. Nobody's here, I don't think this board or anybody else wants to have a cost that's prohibitive or a cost that's going to cost a lot of people. Nobody's doing this for any vendetta or right reason or wrong reason. I just think that, first of all, that we have to get a solution to it. Secondly of all, it sounds very much like the Conservation Authority. If we don't do something, they're going to come forward with it. And I think that if there's always the appeal process, and this is just the next step in the process. If there's anything missteps in that, Ken, would you like to clarify anything?
No, I'm in agreement.
Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, calling the question, all in favor? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3. Opposed? Oh. Okay, so we've got 1 opposed, 3 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries. Okay, that brings us to number 4 on the agenda, meeting to consider the Hugh Davidson Municipal Drain. 4.1, presentation of the report. Michael Garrett.
Hi, sorry about that. I was just clicking and it didn't want to go. So through the chair, I'm Michael Garrett. I represent M. Garrett's Consulting, and I'm here to make a presentation for the Hugh Davidson drain. So the drain was prepared under Section 78 of the Drainage Act. The scope of work includes preparing a new drain report to address the proposed enclosure, complete with maintenance specifications, preparation of a new schedule of maintenance for the maintenance and repair of the drain. The existing conditions. The Hugh Davidson drain is 1.9 kilometers in length and is located in parts of lot 18, 19, and 20, concession 8, in the city of Kawartha Lakes. The drain commences at the north limit of Highway 7, road allowance just east of Taylor Road. In July of 1977, H.M. Gibson prepared a report for the Hugh Davidson drain. The drain was a combination of an open and closed drain. The closed drain commenced at the northern limits of Highway 7 and extended 802 meters in a southwesterly direction, outletting to an open channel drain just west of the Taylor Road allowance. The open ditch then extended 1.158 kilometers in a southwesterly direction and discharges into the Mariposa Brook. The report did not include culverts, but there was one access culvert on the drain, which is located at station 1+335. The access services the lands with the roll number ending with 30-234. The culvert's in poor shape, does not have sufficient cover, and is in need of replacement. The open channel on the east half of lot 19, concession 8, area roll number 30-235, was enclosed privately by a landowner. The date of this enclosure is unknown. It appears the landowner installed a 350 millimeter diameter concrete tile with a 450 millimeter diameter CSP outlet. The outlet has separated from the concrete pipe and is in need of repair. So the design of this drain, it was designed to accommodate the drainage coefficient of 37 millimeters per 24 hours. It includes a minimum tile depth of 760 millimeters plus the tile depth. The downstream channel is free flowing and does not appear to have a significant amount of sediment, and as such, the proposed work is to do minimal work downstream. The report includes a modified grade line for future maintenance in the event the capacity of the downstream channel becomes reduced due to debris and sediment. Currently, the channel is stable with minimal accumulation of sediment, and so the intention of this report is to minimize the disturbance downstream, but we have to make sure that if it ever does become a problem, that you can use the Drainage Act as an avenue to give yourself a sufficient outlet without opening up the report or going through approvals. There's been an estimated cost in the amount of $89,403, which includes engineering. Assessments for the drainage works have been assessed as following. The cost to work around the existing fence, remove and repair of the broken outlet pipe has been assessed to 100% of the cost applied as an outlet assessment to all upstream lands and roads based on equivalent hectares. The rationale behind that is, although that was put in privately, they would have needed that outlet pipe up by Taylor Road if they didn't enclose that drain separately. So I didn't penalize them for that. It's just part of the life on a drain. And so they pay their portion downstream because the landowner took or connected to it privately. The cost of catch basin 1 has been assessed equally to the lands ending with 30-234 and 30-235. Access culverts are generally assessed with 50% of the cost applied as a benefit assessment to the benefiting landowner, with the remaining costs assessed upstream based on equivalent hectares. So the cost of this culvert was estimated to be $14,978. And since we're dealing with an enclosure that's mainly picked up by the landowner enclosing it, we do credit him for the cost of the enclosure because you're entitled to one access across a drain. So when you close that drain, you're now closing a portion of the drain. So we don't penalize them. We give them a bit of a credit, but of course we treat that section of pipe like a regular access. So the landowner will pay half the amount on the length of the pipe. So basically the landowner is getting a $7,500 credit for that culvert. All remaining costs of that enclosure, like I said, are assessed to the requesting landowner. So that's 89% of the regular drain enclosure will go against the landowner who requested it, with the remaining costs going upstream based on equivalent hectares. And that's because there is some benefit to the people upstream. If you have a closed pipe, there's less maintenance. So we look at prorating it over a couple maintenance clauses to reduce the assessment on the person enclosing it, so that the people upstream have the benefit for not completing so much maintenance in the future. So they don't get a free ride just because the guy downstream is closing it in. However, the guy downstream, the landowner downstream, has to pay the bulk of the cost because there was already a ditch there and it's really benefiting him to complete his crops. The cost to update the maintenance schedule is assessed with 100% of the cost applied as an outlet assessment based on hectares for each schedule. Allowances are included in the report, maintenance schedules are included in the report, specifications are included in the report. The report includes a plan and profile. And I'm available to answer any questions from the board and from the landowners within the watershed.
Thank you very much, Mike. Board members, any questions of Mike at this point? Councillor O'Reilly?
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation, Mike. Did you have many calls or questions from the affected landowners?
I have talked with Mr. Bagshaw a couple times, but this was well before. So when I got done my draft report, when I sent it in for approvals, I sent it to Mr. Bagshaw. Haven't heard back from him. And then I also talked with one landowner who's on the line today, and he just called me with some general questions. I don't want to speak on his behalf, but they were pretty simple about where he was located in the watershed. It doesn't mean he doesn't have any other questions, but he is on the line. So if he had other questions, I could answer, but I think I answered everything. And other than that, I have not talked to any landowners. No one's called me.
Would it be fair to say that Mr. Bagshaw is probably the primary benefactor of this and he would probably have the most concerns?
Yes, it would be fair to say that, but we were pretty, I mean, I talked with Mr. Bagshaw quite a bit at the meetings and throughout the course of the design to make sure that, we were on the same page. But in the end, we have a requirement under the act to bring that pipe to an outlet sufficiently sized in case the upstream lands ever want to improve it. So we design it to the current standards. And unfortunately, Mr. Bagshaw stuck with that design as well, which it's a big pipe, right? But he's also enclosing the downstream end of a drain.
And to the best of your knowledge, he didn't have any concerns about it. He's aware of that.
No, I think he would have called. I expected a call. He didn't call me though.
Okay, that's why I had to check it.
I have talked to him probably 3 times or 2 times since the report, though. It's not like I haven't had discussions with him. I just haven't had any discussions since I gave him the final report.
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, is there anybody from the public wishing to speak to this drain? Anthony Augustine, did you have some questions for Mr. Garrett?
Hello? Oh,
hello, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. I have a question to Mike. I also talked to Mike.
I think we've lost you, Anthony. Are you there?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I want to ask one more question from Mike that after you finish this Taylor Road project, how my property will get some benefit and how much the property tax will increase? 2 questions I have.
Yeah, through the chair. So your benefit, you're not tied directly to the drain, so you're not getting a benefit, so to speak, as a regular benefit under the Drainage Act. Where you're affected is your lands are located in the watershed, and every landowner that's in a watershed of a municipal drain has a responsibility for the water that they generate on their lands. Yeah. And as it flows into the drain and goes downstream. So everyone in a watershed bears the responsibility for the water generated on their lands as it travels down chain in a municipal drain. So you don't see that connection like you would if you're a farmer with a direct tile benefit. But there's a lot of places. I mean, this is what happens on drains. The drain goes down the middle, but everyone's water goes into it, and everyone bears that responsibility for the amount of water. There's a section in the Act where it states about how much runoff's generated on your property and your responsibility as it gets to the drain. So your lands, the residentials are usually assessed at a rate of 2 to 1. So in agriculture, it forms the basis of the analysis of a 1 hectare of land, equivalent hectares. So a residential land has a bit more impervious area, so they're usually at 2. Gravel roads would be 3, and paved roads would be 4. So I don't do the tax benefit. Where this comes in, you will get a bill, and the people I could be wrong, but I guess I don't know if Joel could speak better to this, whether you assess it out yearly or if you just you send a bill out and they pay it. I know where we are, I get mine in the mail. So at the end of the year, it comes in with all the other assessments, and they just they'd only do them once a year in our municipality, but it's not really a tax. It's on your assessment, but it's not part of your property tax. It's an assessment tax for being on a municipal drain.
Okay. But you don't know average how much I will get raised, right? Average.
Well, yeah, I did in the report. So if you look at the report, you'll see your assessment there. And if you look at the schedule assessment, which would be you're on page 2 of 2, and you can see what you're estimated to be. So you're estimated to be $102 right now. I would say that with COVID pricing, I did increase the cost of this drain right before I issued it, and the rationale is because of the 133%. Mr. Bagshaw's already waited a long time for this drain, so if we get some pricing, I can't afford to be within the 130, outside of the 133%. We're going to tender it, and it's going to go to the tender, so you're only paying the tendered prices, but I would expect even at $100, I mean, I hope that it comes in less, obviously, because I did look at, we had to do a material price upgrade right before the report was authored, but I could get a new material price next week and it could be another $30 a meter, and they wouldn't, I mean, we get them, we're good for 2 weeks on material prices right now. That's it. So we try our best, and I think I've made it so you're not going to be surprised at the end. I hope you won't be surprised with your assessment. I hope it will come in right around that. I'm not anticipating it's not. I've tried to buffer it a little bit for you, but that's the assessment that I have in the report.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Augustine. Okay, if there's no further questions, that brings us to 4.3, the opportunity to add or withdraw signatures from the petition. Okay, so I'm assuming at this point everything stays the same as the way it was. That brings us to 4.4. So again, there's 3 possible recommendations that the board can make that are in your package. What are your wishes?
Mr. Chair, there's on the top of page 4, there's a recommendation. Is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
There's 2 there under that. There's two bullet points there, right?
There's 3 recommendations, the same as the previous one, but the same thing. The first one is to go ahead with the engineer's report. The second one is to reject it, and the third one is to refer it back.
I would be prepared to move that we go ahead with the engineer's report for discussion purposes.
Okay, motion from Councillor O'Reilly that the Drainage Board recommend to the City of Kawartha Lakes recommend that the City of Kawartha Lakes Drainage Board recommend that Council adopt the Hugh Davidson Municipal Drain Section 78 Engineer's Report as prepared by M. Garrett's P. Engineer, and instruct the clerk to prepare the necessary bylaw. The council proceeds with the first and second reading of the bylaw to provisionally adopt the report, and the council instructs staff to make the necessary arrangements for a court of revision to be held on the Hugh Davidson Municipal Drain Section 78 Engineers Report as prepared by M. Garrett's P. Engineering. Is there a seconder for that motion? Tim? Thank you for discussion. Go ahead, Mike. You had your hands up there.
I just wanted to tell Mr. Augustine that, and any landowner, obviously I represent all landowners. So before you shut the meeting down, if he has any questions or anyone, they can always call me. I represent all the landowners on the drain. So I want to make sure that he knows, even if it's the same questions, or if I'm there to tell him how I made the report. So I'll answer any question on my report, especially before the court of revision.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Garretts. Any discussion from the board? Okay, seeing none, calling the question. All in favor? Okay, that carries. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to number 5. I don't believe we have any other business this evening. Unless Mike and Juan, you have anything that you want to report on this evening before we all call it a night?
Nothing, through you, Mr. Chairman, nothing further to add.
Thank you. So that brings us down to number 6. Would somebody like to make a motion for adjournment? Jim, and seconded by Mike. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. The Drainage Board is adjourned at 8:46 p.m. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.